For decades, Bishop T.D. Jakes has been recognized as more than a preacher. He has been a voice that shaped faith, culture, leadership, and emotional healing for millions around the world. His sermons carried weight because they spoke not only to spiritual belief, but to real-life struggle, resilience, and hope. To many, he was a constant, someone who seemed unshakable, always present, always strong. That is why, when quiet concern about his health began to surface, it stirred something deeper than curiosity. It touched fear. People were not watching a celebrity. They were watching someone they trusted with their most vulnerable moments. The first signs. People couldn't ignore. The concern did not arrive suddenly or dramatically. It crept in slowly, almost politely, through small observations longtime followers noticed before they could even explain why. His voice, once thunderous, sometimes sounded softer. His pace across the stage slowed. His pauses grew longer, more deliberate. None of this felt alarming on its own. Many brushed it off as age, travel fatigue, or the natural rhythm of a man who had carried a global ministry for decades. But for those who had listened to him for years, something felt different. Not broken, just changed. Absences that sparked questions. What truly shifted the conversation were his occasional absences. Conferences he once headlined without fail now featured him less frequently. Appearances became selective, schedules adjusted. At first, supporters defended him instinctively, reminding others that rest is natural and deserved. Yet as months passed, the pattern became harder to dismiss. Social media began to fill with gentle questions rather than accusations. Is Bishop Jakes okay? Has anyone heard how he's doing? These were not rumors fueled by scandal, but concern rooted in care. Silence that fueled speculation. As the questions grew louder, one thing remained consistent: silence. His family and ministry chose not to address the speculation directly, likely out of a desire for privacy and dignity. Yet in the absence of information, people filled the gaps themselves. Online discussions multiplied. Some suggested exhaustion from decades of service. Others speculated about health challenges, though no evidence supported extreme claims. The silence was not malicious, but it created space for imagination, and imagination can grow heavy when mixed with fear. Why this concern felt different. What made this moment unique was the emotional investment people had in him. Bishop Jakes was not simply admired. He was leaned on. He had counseled the grieving, encouraged the broken, and challenged leaders to grow. His words helped people survive divorces, losses, addictions, and identity crises. To imagine him struggling felt personal. Supporters weren't asking questions because they doubted him. They were asking because they loved him. A man who carried more than most. Over the years, Bishop Jakes has been open about the weight of leadership. He spoke honestly about stress, responsibility, and the emotional toll of guiding millions. The Potter's House grew into more than a church. It became a global ministry, a publishing powerhouse, a conference host, and a cultural influence. With that growth came expectation. Invitations, travel, decisions, and the unspoken pressure to always be present followed him everywhere. Many began to wonder if what they were witnessing was not sudden decline, but the natural result of decades of relentless service. The breaking of silence. Eventually, the silence surrounding the situation began to lift. Not through dramatic press releases or public statements designed for headlines, but through honest, human acknowledgement. Members of Bishop Jakes' family, including his daughter Sarah Jakes Roberts, spoke carefully and thoughtfully about what he had been experiencing. Their words surprised many. There was no sudden crisis, no hidden emergency, and no dramatic collapse. Instead, they described something deeply familiar to anyone who has carried responsibility for a long time. The cumulative toll of decades of leadership, constant travel, emotional investment, and physical strain. It was not a shocking revelation, but a grounding one, reminding people that even the most respected leaders are still human. A long road, not a sudden fall. The family explained that what seemed sudden to the public had actually been unfolding gradually. Bishop Jakes had continued serving through fatigue and stress because his calling had always come before his comfort. Like many leaders, he minimized his own needs in order to remain present for others. Over time, that choice carried consequences. His health challenges were not framed as a collapse or a failure of faith. Instead, they were presented as the natural result of carrying too much for too long without adequate rest. This perspective shifted the tone of the conversation, replacing fear with understanding and judgment with compassion, choosing rest over resistance. Rather than describing this season as a crisis, the family emphasized it as a pause, necessary, intentional, and restorative. Bishop Jakes was not stepping away in defeat, nor was he retreating from his calling. He was choosing rest as an act of wisdom. That distinction mattered deeply to those who had followed him for years. It reframed the narrative from decline to discernment, from weakness to self-respect. For many supporters, this choice modeled something powerful, that caring for one's health is not abandoning responsibility, but preserving the ability to serve well in the long run. Relief mixed with new questions. While the family's openness brought relief, it also raised new questions. What would this season mean for the Potter's House? How long would Bishop Jakes step back from his usual pace? And who would lead in his absence? These questions were natural, not rooted in doubt, but in concern for continuity. Leadership transitions, even temporary ones, often stir uncertainty. Yet they also reveal whether a ministry has been built to depend on one voice or to function as a shared vision. The rise of shared leadership. During this period, Sarah Jakes Roberts stepped into a more visible leadership role. Her presence brought reassurance to many who already trusted her insight, authenticity, and connection with a new generation. At the same time, it reminded the world that Bishop Jakes had never built a ministry centered on himself alone. He had invested for years in developing leaders, empowering voices, and preparing others to carry responsibility. Seeing that preparation come to life offered a quiet sense of stability during a season of change. A ministry adjusting, not collapsing. The Potter's House did not fall into uncertainty or confusion. It adjusted. Guest speakers were welcomed, responsibilities were shared, and worship continued. The rhythm changed, but the mission remained intact. This adjustment became an important part of the story, demonstrating that healthy leadership includes the ability to step back without everything falling apart. For many churches watching, it served as a lesson in sustainability, that strong ministries are not built on constant presence alone, but on trust, preparation, and shared responsibility. A broader lesson for faith communities beyond one leader and one church, this moment sparked reflection across faith communities. It challenged long-held assumptions about strength, endurance, and sacrifice. Many began to ask whether leaders are given enough space to rest, and whether congregations unknowingly place unrealistic expectations on those who serve them. Bishop Jakes's season of rest became a reminder that longevity in leadership requires care, boundaries, and community support. A story still unfolding. This chapter in Bishop Jakes's journey is not an ending, but a transition. His influence remains strong, his legacy secure, and his voice respected. What has changed is the way people see him, not as an untouchable figure, but as a man who chose wisdom over exhaustion. In doing so, he offered one of his most meaningful messages yet, that rest is not weakness, and that true leadership includes knowing when to pause, public support, and lingering doubt. Social media filled with messages of prayer and gratitude. People wrote about how Bishop Jakes had saved their faith, strengthened their marriages, or given them courage to keep going. Yet as with any public figure, skepticism remained. Some believed more was being withheld. Others questioned transparency. These doubts did not erase the love, but they kept the conversation alive. A human story, not a scandal. At its heart, this is not a story of downfall or secrecy. It is a human story. A story about a man who gave much, learned when to pause, and reminded millions that even the strongest leaders need care. In doing so, Bishop T.D. Jakes didn't lose influence. He modeled wisdom, and that may be one of the most powerful sermons he has ever preached.